If you're an aspiring journalist, you might be wondering, how much money do TV reporters make? That's the topic of today's video, and in my experience, people tend to be pretty secretive about how much money they make. However, this information would have been really useful for me when I was just getting started in news. So in this video, I'm sharing what my first salary offers were and also what I know about news salaries in general, based on my own experiences, but also conversations with peers and mentors in the industry. So let's jump into it. Here in Seattle, which is the number 13 news market in the US, it's still possible for TV news anchors to make six figures. However, I have heard that newer TV reporters are being offered closer to $70,000 to come and work in Seattle. Now, my big disclaimer is that I do not have salary information for every reporter at every news station. However, I'm sharing this with you anyway so that you have a rough idea of what's possible. Now, if you're not sure what I'm referring to when I say that Seattle is number 13, I'm referring to the Nielsen DMA, or Designated Market Area Rankings. If you look at the current list, you'll see that Nielsen lists the estimated number of TV homes for every city in the rankings. New York is number 1 with more than 6 million TV homes, and LA is number 2. As you get farther down the list, the salaries also tend to get lower. So even though a six-figure salary is still possible in Seattle, that's not always the case when you get to the smaller cities. And if you're just starting out in news with very little experience, do not expect a six-figure salary. So in 2017, when I was getting ready to graduate from college, I had 2 TV news offers on the table from 2 different stations in the same city. That city was ranked, I think, in the upper 60s or lower 70s, and they were offers to be what the industry calls an MMJ, or multimedia journalist, which means that in addition to being on camera, I would have been shooting and editing my stories as a one-woman band. So it's a lot of work, right? One station had offered me $34,000 per year, and the second had offered $26,000 per year. I have to admit, when I got those salary offers, I didn't really feel that great about them because I knew that they were aligned with what some of my friends made in their first jobs, but a lot of my friends were working in much smaller markets, like markets that were ranking in the triple digits. So I thought, you know, if I'm getting my job in a bigger market, they might be able to pay me more, but that wasn't the case. Those offers just didn't make sense for me at the time, especially when I considered the cost of living in that particular city. And when I look back, I'm glad I didn't take those offers. I had tried to negotiate with the station that offered $26,000 per year, but they weren't willing to budge. And to be clear, the money wasn't the only reason that I turned down these offers, but the money was also not a pull factor. Whenever the topic of journalism salaries, especially TV news salaries, has come up in conversations with folks who don't work in news, they're always so shocked. Like, they always expect the salaries of journalists to be much higher than they are. And I know it's easy to look at someone on TV and assume, oh, they must be making all this money, but that's not always the case, especially in those smaller cities. I think it's really important that I mention that a lot of the folks who take TV news jobs, not all, but a lot of the folks who I've spoken to, got financial help from their families early in their career when they were in their first jobs out of college that didn't pay very well. And I don't think there's anything wrong with getting financial help from your parents, but we have to be honest about it, especially when we're talking to students and other aspiring journalists, so that they have a better idea and more realistic expectations of what a career in TV might actually look like. So local TV news is typically not a career path that you would pursue if you want to make a lot of money right away. And it's really not uncommon to hear reporters say that they're overworked and underpaid. I think the big wake-up call happened for me me when I was still in college. I had an informational interview with someone who was working as a local TV news reporter. He was just really honest with me about how hard it could be sometimes. Of course, it was fulfilling and he loved his job, but it was also really difficult. He was hustling every day, working as a one-man band, but he also shared that in his first job, he lived in low-income housing and he struggled a lot. And I do worry that some of the really low starting salaries are a barrier for really talented journalists who don't come from families with a lot of money. And it's such a shame when I hear of very talented journalists choosing to leave the industry because it no longer makes sense for their financial situation. But that's a decision that I completely respect, because the reality is that so many of these journalists would be making so much more money for the same skills if they chose to work in communications, PR, or marketing instead, especially at a large corporation. But if you're set on pursuing journalism or TV news and you just want to get a better idea of the salaries that you would make, then I would just really encourage you to do research on the specific roles, companies, and cities that you want to work in. Sites like PayScale, Indeed, and Glassdoor are all great starting points, but I would still encourage you to talk to your peers and mentors in the industry, because a lot of those sites will list very wide salary ranges. Indeed, for example, says that news anchors can make anywhere from $14,000 to $95,000 per year. That's a very big range. So step one, if you're going to use these sites, is to filter by location if you can, duh. But you'll get a much more accurate idea if you just talk to folks who currently have the jobs you're applying for or previously had the jobs you're applying for. When I was trying to figure all this stuff out, I really leaned on people I went to school with who worked full-time in journalism after graduation, also mentors from my internships, and contacts from the Asian American Journalists Association. Getting salary data through your own networks will be one of the best ways to prepare for a salary negotiation. If you're interested in learning more about salary negotiation strategies for any industry, then make sure to hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you won't miss my next video, where we'll take a deeper dive into how to negotiate your pay. As always, if you have any questions about the topics we've covered in this video or any of my other videos, or if you just want to say hi, find me on Instagram and let's chat in the DMs.